Yeah, welcome everyone. And here is our homepage, our lab homepage, and we are calling it Green Bitcoin. And my first question is why it is Green Bitcoin? Actually, our Bitcoin is the fork of original Bitcoin, but here we used the algorithm that is developed by our lab, that is ECC POW, and recently on paper has published from our professor with the concept of Green Bitcoin, and we are going to develop this concept to our client. Yeah, and if we go to this link, here is all things about our Bitcoin client. Actually, what is Bitcoin client? Bitcoin client is a software. Bitcoin client is a software, and it is developed in different languages, and the client we are using, that is actually developed in C++ programming language, but you can use other language too. And another thing is that this client is developed for different operating system. Different operating system, I mean that someone for Windows, someone for Linux, someone for Mac or otherwise. Yeah. But we are using the client that is for Linux, and previously our client was dependent only on Ubuntu 18.04 OS, but professor asked us to make it universal for all Linux, and finally we did that. And here is the steps to download and use this Linux client for Bitcoin. Firstly, this is the command to update your system. I mean that your operating system should be updated, and here is some dependencies. Here is some dependencies for your Bitcoin client. Don't think too much about these dependencies. I mean that don't try to think how these dependencies made, how these dependencies sense your OS. Just this time try to think these dependencies are very essential for your Bitcoin client. Okay, and then these are also the dependencies. This is also the dependencies, and can
you elaborate a little bit? Too small.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And this is the dependencies that is actually used for API. API means that I mean that professor yesterday said you that all of these request and response are working using the API, and these dependencies actually the ZMQ. ZMQ is a well known package. Sometimes it is called 0MQ, message queue, or sometimes not MQ. This is needed for Bitcoin API, and this dependencies are needed for Bitcoin wallet. Need for Bitcoin wallet. Then this is also a optional dependency. Then we can jump to the actual scenario. Here is our Git repo, from where you can download or clone our repo. Just from the Git you can see the codes and clone the repo. Then you have to switch the exact folder of this client, like Bitcoin ECC. Then you have to check out. Check out, I means that there are lots of fork we made to develop over time, and lastly I make this fork to make some changes, and you have to switch this fork to work it better in any Linux OS. Then these steps, with these steps you are sure that you have downloaded the client, and check you are exactly to this fork. Okay. Then install BarclayDB. Actually Bitcoin use BarclayDB 4.8 you may install BarclayDB in different ways in your system, but it will install BarclayDB 5.1 or later, things like that. But for Bitcoin you need 4.8. You need 4.8. That's why Bitcoin make his own way to install that 4.8, and it is inside the Bitcoin client. You have to go to this folder, your Bitcoin client that you previously downloaded. Then you have to go to the you have to run this command to this folder, and there is a contrib folder, and in their contrib folder you have to install BarclayDB 4.8, and pwd, it means present working directory. You need not to write here pwd, just put a dot there. That will install this BarclayDB in that folder. As soon as you run this command, it will produce such two statement in your console window. Yeah. Then what you have to do, as soon as it produce this two statement, I will request you to make another console window to the same folder, Bitcoin ECC, because this two you need later. Yeah. When you run the terminal to the same folder, then export your database. Just copy from here and paste to your CLI. You may use the same CLI, no matter. Yeah. Then you are in the same folder again. Always you are in the same folder. Here I written again to move this folder, but you can in the same folder. Then you have to run the command autogen. This autogen just assure you that the compilation resources already are in your system. I mean that you are going to compile the Bitcoin client codes, and this command check all the required things are existed in your system. If this checking is finished, then you have to configure. From where you will get this line, you will copy this line from here that is generated from your system. Okay. Yeah. Then configuration is done. Then you have to make. Make means compile. As soon as you compile, then you have to run this command, sudo make installs. This make installs command will download or install some executables. After compilation, you are going to executables, and this command will install some execution helper. Okay. After installing these execution helpers, you need to run your Bitcoin client. This command is for running your Bitcoin client. Actually, this TX index like that, when you just run this command to run your client, but this one for making different indexes, maintaining some indexes for every transaction. Yeah, that's you will understand it later, because it is very helpful for API request. And this section is for if you close the terminal, close your running window, this client will run in backend. Okay, that's why. I want to summarize the things again, that firstly we will install the dependencies, then we will go to the Git repo and clone the repo and check out the repo, then we will install the database, then we will export the database, as well as we will check the environment that is required for compilation. Then we will go to configuration, and then we will compile the client. Then we will install some executable dependencies that is required for execution. After that, we will run our client. This all about the downloading and running the Bitcoin client. After that, maybe you want to mine what we are talking for last couple of days. Yeah, and then we are going to mining. Here is a way to clone Git repo and mine. And lastly, professor asked me to check this one, and I checked this Git repo. It is our previous lab members' work, and how far I found there, we need not actually this repo. That repo is just for running this command. This command generate or mine Bitcoin. I mean that Bitcoin CLI generate to address, generate on block. This one means on block to your address. This is your wallet address. This is your wallet address, and it will generate a block. This is the hash of that block. And actually, the above program, you can follow this one, but this program is just for running the mining program all time continuously. Clear? But you can do the same thing using a while loop, means while condition is true, and do the same instruction here, and then done. It will keep running this command to your console window, and it will generate blocks. Yeah. Yeah, this is obviously public key. This is obviously public key. Then this is the process of start mining.
Then you have to first be able to create a public key and private key.
Yeah. And I'm showing that here. Test Green Bitcoin. From where you will get that address, just run your client. Then you will initially get 0 blocks if you are not connected to any network. If you are connected to our network, then you will get blocks. If the network is isolated from our one, then you will get nothing. Then block is 0. Then from your console, if you run this command, get new address, you will get your address. Yeah, you have to save this address, and
so that routine generates the private key, public key.
This is the public key, and I can open a window here.
So you don't have to do all this today.
You may generate that public key like that. After that, you can dump your private key regarding your public key.
Yeah. So let's go back to the setup part. Right? What should we do in case something there is problem? When we try to download and install it, and maybe we run into problem. Can you help?
Yeah, of course. You are always invited to our lab. We are always there, except the weekend.
Can you tell us your email or
Yeah.
office phone number?
I have my personal phone number, but
your location, maybe, so that people can visit you in case they have a problem. because the installation has to be done, all of it. All of it should be able to install. And then you can start to just, using it, these APIs.
Yeah, here is I am, Ishtiaq Ahmed. Maybe here is my social media accounts as well as my email address, and our location is building C, 315 room number. Building C, 315 room number. We are always there. And at the time of installation, you should carefully follow your console window. If some errors encountered, then you should not go to the further step.
Yeah, and then if you run into a problem,
Yeah.
talk about it in our Kakao group.
Yeah, in our Kakao group.
Sumi, can you invite him to?
Yeah, always you can knock us. We will be with you. Yeah, and thanks for today, I think.
I think that's good enough for today.
Yeah.
And then